Okay guys, today we're going to simplify radical expressions. This is where you're going to need this chart. If you don't have this chart, please ask the substitute. I'll make a couple of extras while I'm out. What I want you to notice is anytime on this paper you see a perfect square, just write the word perfect in that column and just write the answer down. So like 144 is perfect, and if you're not sure why it's perfect because it's on this list. Now whenever see, where's 144? There's 144. Now, you're not going to have this list on the keystones. You might have to make it. Don't go past 10. You probably won't need to go past 10, but if you do, go ahead and maybe even go to 15. But you just use your calculator to make this list. Okay, 144 is perfect, so the answer is just the square root of it, which is 12. 98, however, is not perfect, so you need to go to this list and figure out what number on this list goes into 98. If you remember from your studies, you would start at 81. And you would do 98 divided by 81 and get a decimal. 98 divided by 64 and get a decimal. 98 divided by 49 would work, and 98 divided by 49 is 2. So you do the square root of 49 and the square times the square root of 2, like that. You can write them separate or you can write it under 1. So the square root of 49 is perfect, so it becomes 7, and the square root of 2 just attaches behind it. Now we have the square root of 20. So you go to your list and you would start around 16. 20 does not divide by 16. 20 does not divide by 9. 20 does divide by 4. So you would say, okay, it's 4 and 5, because 4 times 5 is 20. The square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 5 just stays attached. Now what we have is 2 times the square root of 847. I'm pulling my calculator up so you can see how this is going to work. And you can just use a basic calculator on this. You don't have to have one of the fancy ones. This, by the way, will be a concept on your final, so understanding it now is pretty important. So the first thing we're going to do is carry over that 2, and we're going to split up that 847 into its perfect square root and to the number that goes into it. So if I have 847, I'll start around 576. So I'm going to do 847 divide by, it's a weird glare. That didn't help. My cell phone is like glaring at them. Okay, that's good.
Maybe put brightness down?
I could. No, they can deal. Okay, so 847 divided by, I'm not even taking that off the video, 529 is a decimal. So move on to 484, it's a decimal. Move on to 441, it's a decimal. Go to 400 on the list, it's a decimal. 361 is a decimal. 324 is a decimal. 289 is a decimal. 256 is a decimal. 225 is a decimal. 196 is a decimal. This is fun. 169 is a decimal. 144 is a decimal. 121 is a decimal. There we go. So 121 does not give me a decimal. It's my first one. So it's 121 and 7 was the result my calculator gave me. So I have to do 121 times 7. So I'm going to bring over the 2. I'm going to take the square root of 121. The square root, there you go. The square root of 121 is 11. And then you have the square root of 7 left over behind it, which ends up being 22 square roots of 7. The next one is 192. Start at 169. 169 is a decimal. 144 is a decimal. 121 is a decimal. 100 is a decimal. 81 is a decimal. 64, so it's 64, and I know my calculator's hard to see, but 64 and 3. So you have to do the square root of 64 and the square root of 3, which ends up being 8 square root of 3. The next one, something important to realize, is that 196 is on your paper, and the square root of 196 is simply 14. So it's perfect. So the answer is the square root of 196, which is just 14. Okay, number 7. The square root of 50 is not perfect, so you go to your list. You will eventually figure out that it's 25 times 2, and the square root of 25 is 5, square root of 2 left behind it. 49 is on your list. It's perfect. Because it's perfect, we just write the answer, which is 7. 11 times, now what we're going to do is we're going to split this next one up, 180. So I will start at 121 because I know the other ones don't work. I also know 121 doesn't work, but that's okay. We'll go over it anyway. So I have 180 inside. We'll divide by 121, we get a decimal. Divide by 100, we get a decimal. Divide by 81, we get a decimal. 64 is a decimal. 49 is a decimal. 36 is 5. So I do 36 and 5. So I end up with 11 times 6, because the square root of 36 is 6, times the square root of 5 at the end. And we know 11 times 6 is 66 with the square root of 5. Okay, one more. We have that 16 randomly hanging out in front. Now we do 54. Now 54 is not on my list. So I'm going to do 54 divided by 36, does not work. 25 does not work. 16 does not work. 9 is 6, so you get 9 and 6. So I'm going to do the square root of 9 times the square root of 6. The square root of 9 becomes a 3, so I do 16 times 3, square root of 6. And then 16 times 3 is 48 square roots of 6. Okay, so this side of the paper is the notes. The other side of the paper is your homework to complete.